About traveling to Singapore. I'm Chris. This is Topher. We are Yellow Productions. We are the internet's #1 human and stuffed panda traveling duo. And last weekend we saw Crazy Rich Asians, which was all about Singapore. It was set in Singapore. The producer said that that movie was his love letter to Singapore, which inspired me to make this video. Singapore is one of our favorite places to travel, and so in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my top 11 reasons why we love to travel to Singapore. And the first one, reason number one, is definitely the food. Singapore is an amazing destination for food, and the best part about the food is definitely the hawker centers in Singapore. Singapore is famous for these places called hawker centers, which is where street hawkers, people who used to hawk their food on the street, all get together in one place that might have 100 or even 200 food stalls, and they sell it for pretty cheap. It is like the concept of a food court on steroids. Yes, they do have food courts too in Singapore. The difference between a hawker center and a food court is that the food courts are air conditioned. Hawker centers are always open air and outside, from the notion that the people who are selling food there used to hawk it outside on the street. And a great thing about eating at these hawker center street vendors is that they are clean. You never have to worry about getting sick in Singapore from the hawker centers because Singapore has very high cleanliness standards. And I like that because I don't really like to get sick when I go on travel. Some of my favorite foods to eat in hawker centers are laksa, which is actually a Malaysian dish, but I feel like it's super popular in Singapore. It's like a curry-based, it's like a, not curry, it's a coconut and curry-based soup with red chili pepper, shrimp, flour noodles. It's super great. Just a bowl full of deliciousness and flavor. I love wok fried noodles and satay. Singapore has really perfected the art of satay, which is meat on a stick. And fruit juices too. Almost every hawker center you go to, there will be stalls selling fruit juices. And if you've seen my video on the best hawker centers in Singapore, by the way, I've got a link in the description below if you haven't, or a card attached to this video. I love the lime juice, and I also love the sugarcane juice, where they do fresh squeezed sugarcane. And another neat thing about the hawker centers is just the level of almost like honor and politeness that people observe in the hawker centers, where the way you save your seat at a hawker center is you take a pack of tissues and you chope a seat. It's one of these Singlish type words, Singaporean English, and you take your pack of tissues. If this was tissue, you just put it on the seat, and then that seat is basically reserved for you. I mean, everybody respects it. If you were to do that in some place like LA or New York City, chances are somebody would be taking your tissue and blowing your nose with it. This is a live stream. Everybody who's on the live stream, I'm curious what you think about Singapore, or if you're watching the archive, let me know as well. Melanie is on from Facebook. Hey, Melanie from Sunnyvale. David Lewis tuning in from Melbourne. On YouTube, we have Brandon Torres who's joined in. Mick Yared, who's joining in from a small coastal town 3 hours south of Sydney. Vanessa said it sounds yummy. Mimi3000 says it's cool. Brandon Torres asks, what juice is the sweetest in the hawker centers? I don't know. There's probably a lot of sweet juices, but I like the lime juice. It's a sour juice. I would have to say the sugar cane juice is probably the sweetest, since it is just squeezed sugar cane. But they've got everything under the sun, from grape juice to orange juice. They do a lot of iced teas as well. Eric Tan W says, hi Chris, just letting you know that my Singapore videos really helped him and his girlfriend travel around Singapore last year. Cheers. Well, thank you, Eric. I very much appreciate it. And Bobby Wong says, Singapore was great, but it's hot and humid. Yes, probably my least favorite thing about Singapore is absolutely how hot and humid it is. And if you watch my Singapore travel guide, one of the things that I'm doing incessantly in the video is wiping my face. I brought like a hotel towel with me, and I'm wiping my face about every 3 minutes, because if I didn't, in some of those scenes, I would just be dripping wet. And there are people who argue and say, Singapore is not that hot. Maybe for the people who are adapted to it and live there, it isn't. But I'll tell you, from me, someone who's from San Diego, California, a fairly Mediterranean climate where it is very dry and not humid, Singapore is very hot and humid. That's about the pronunciation in Singaporean English pronunciation. And Dieter Hobson has joined in from Brisbane. Thanks for joining in, Dieter. All right, and that's not to say that Singapore doesn't have great high-end food. Singapore has a lot of Michelin-starred restaurants, but they have Michelin-starred stalls in hawker centers. And that was actually a line from the Crazy Rich Asians, is that they said Singapore is about the only place in the world where street vendors get Michelin stars. And also, a classic Singaporean dish is Singaporean chicken rice. And it's kind of a take on certainly a Chinese dish, Hainanese chicken rice, which is basically chicken that's been boiled along with some rice that's been boiled in the chicken broth. But I feel like in Singapore they've just perfected it where it's super tender and super flavorful. And really some of the side items make a difference. You get this thick soy sauce and a chili sambal, which is like a chili sauce with garlic. I've had Hainanese chicken or Singaporean chicken rice in a lot of different places outside of Singapore, and it never tastes quite the same or never tastes quite right. Mick Wee asks if I've ever been to Hong Kong and how does that compare to Singapore. Yes, I've been to Hong Kong a couple of times, and actually we are heading back to Hong Kong this November. Hong Kong, yeah, it's different than Singapore. And so something that some people say about Singapore is like easy Asia because everybody in Singapore speaks English. That makes it easy to go to. In Hong Kong, there's a lot of English speaking, but English isn't the official language of Hong Kong. Cantonese is the official language of Hong Kong. So English is less spoken in Hong Kong than it is in Singapore. And then Hong Kong isn't as diverse as Singapore. What's really neat, and this is one of my future numbers, is just how diverse the food is in Singapore and diverse the population is in Singapore. It's not just Chinese food, but you'll see Indian food and Malaysian food and Japanese food. Where you go to Hong Kong and it's pretty much Cantonese food is what they have in Hong Kong. Though I do love Cantonese food. I love dim sum. Hong Kong, it's two different islands. Singapore, a neat thing about it is it's just one kind of small island, and so you can pretty much get anywhere in about 45 minutes from where you are. Nothing is too far in Singapore. And Jen K says, we loved your Singapore videos for info for our trip earlier this year. Thanks for what you do. My pleasure, Jen K. Thanks for watching. All right, my second reason why I love traveling to Singapore is it's a great mileage run. What's a mileage run? A mileage run is a place where you can go the furthest for the cheapest amount of money. And so Singapore from LAX, the closest international airport to me off the West Coast, round trip flights on United are regularly $600 round trip. I mean, I can go to Singapore for less money than I can go to New York City. I mean, it's pretty crazy, but regularly those flights are cheap. And it's amazing because that is like an 18-hour flight, and yet it's $600, which is great for me at the end of the year when I'm trying to chase my United status and I just need, say, 15,000 more miles. Well, that's an easy round trip from Singapore. And there's a lot of airlines that fly into Singapore, and so that really brings the prices down because there's a lot of competition. The third thing, my third favorite thing that I love about traveling to Singapore is Changi Airport, the airport there in Singapore, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but their airport in Singapore, the international airport in Singapore, it is amazing. It is my favorite airport anywhere in the world. It has a butterfly garden, it has koi fish ponds, it has a movie theater, it has a 3-story slide that if you spend a certain amount of money at the shops, you can show your receipt and ride on this slide. It has 24-hour food courts that never close. It has hotels in the airport, and the airport is just nice and efficient. Like in all the bathrooms, they've got little buttons you can push about how satisfied or happy you are with the bathroom, from a frowny face to a big smiley face. They do the same thing at passport control. You can say frowny face if you were unhappy with the service from passport control. And if you just watched my Crazy Rich Asians travel guide to Singapore, you'll see that they actually have these mints at passport control as well. So if your breath isn't feeling fresh, well, it can be minty fresh if you pick up a mint at passport control. I haven't been to any other countries that you get a mint at passport control. Though I do have to say that the Singaporean airport security, they are the only people that have ever stopped me for nail clippers. I carried nail clippers and I had it in my carry-on, and they took it out and said I couldn't take it on the flight. I had probably had those nail clippers in my bag for well over 1,000 security checks, and it's been never taken out. But leave it to Singapore to actually pay thorough attention to what is in my bag. And a lot of my Singapore trips, because they're just mileage runs, I just carry on, meaning that I'm only staying there for like 2 days or something like that, and then turning around. I'm not that crazy where, there are crazy people who will literally do Singapore as a mileage run, which is, leave LA at, say, 1 p.m. or whenever the flight is, get to Singapore at midnight, and then get back on the flight from Singapore to LA at 6 in the morning. I actually like to enjoy Singapore for a couple days before just turning back because, frankly, that much plane flying without sleeping is just crazy. Brandon Torres has got to gather those airline miles. Absolutely. I was shooting for my million miler status on United, which I just achieved last year, but I'm still going for my Premier Platinum status, which is 75,000 miles. Bobby Wong says, that's awesome. I didn't know it was that cheap from LAX. The flights are pretty cheap from LAX. And Mimi 3000 says it's super cheap to Singapore from Hawaii because of budget airlines. Mimi 3000, I'm curious, have you taken any of those budget airlines like Scoot, or which one are you thinking? Mick Yard said, we've done 2 trips to Singapore of the past few years and loved it. The MRT is an amazing public transit system, so clean and efficient. It is, Mick, and that is number 7. We'll get to that in a little bit. Mimi 3000 says, the airport looks incredible. It is. Brandon Torres says, how many restaurants are there in the food court at the airport? Oh, there's a lot of food courts. There's a lot of restaurants. But at least the one I'm thinking of, there's probably 8 or 10 restaurants in the particular 24-hour food court, but it is a huge airport. Minnie C says, I love everything about Singapore except for the tropical heat and humidity. Great food. Love the hawker centers. The airport is voted one of the best airports year after year. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that really, if there is a downer for Singapore, it is how hot it is. It is really hot and oppressive. I've never been in a place really that's been more hot and humid than Singapore. But then, of course, I've never been to the Middle East either. So I'd hear there'd probably be some places that would be warmer. At least there's pretty good air conditioning in Singapore. I do have to say that. Bobby Wong says, I recommend asking information at the airport when you get there, what attractions are outside of the security checkpoint. We couldn't get to the slide because we already went through security and we were told the slide was landside. Well, that's a bummer, Bobby. Well, hopefully next time you go to Singapore, you can check out the slide. My 4th favorite thing about traveling to Singapore is Singapore Airlines. Singapore Airlines, it's the big carrier in Singapore, not the budget carrier, but their big luxury character. Singapore Airlines is one of my favorite airlines, and while I am a big United flyer, that's because I'm based in the US and United goes where I go, but if I'm going places that Singapore Airlines flies, I love to fly Singapore Airlines, particularly because they have satay in flight. You'll get chicken satay where they actually cook the chicken on a stick over a flame on board the plane. They will do this if you're in business class on any route other than to the US. Why don't they do it to the US? Well, the TSA has told them that they can't have an open flame in flight because that's against the US's security guidelines, which is lame because you get cheated out of your in-flight satay. Singapore Airlines, I also love their lounges. If I'm any place that has a Singapore Airlines lounge, I will go into there as opposed to any other airline's lounge. What I love about Singapore Airlines in the lounge is they'll have dim sum in the lounge. They'll have shrimp dumplings and shumai, often barbecue pork buns. I mean, the Singapore Airlines lounge is really, you can make a full-on meal out of the lounge. Instead of a typical American Airlines lounge where you will have, carrot sticks and some ranch dressing and maybe some crackers if you're lucky on a good day. The other thing that I love about Singapore Airlines is absolutely how their flight attendants dress, known as the Singapore Girls. The Singapore Girl dress, they've worn the same dress since 1972. It's based on a classic Malaysian design, but they just look so prim and proper and put together. And Singapore Airlines is also famous for training their flight attendants well beyond what anybody else trains their flight attendants to. Their flight attendants are actually much nicer and helpful and actually service people on the plane instead of a lot of American flight attendants, which, you're lucky if they don't bump you in your knees with the cart. Susan DeBrule says the airport in Singapore is the best. I agree, Susan. Brandon Torres says, I love warm weather, but the humidity is a no-go for me. Yeah, you could cut the humidity with a knife. It's that thick. Mimi3000 says, I've flown on Air Asia to Osaka twice from Honolulu, and I actually like them. Someone I knew flew on Scoot to Osaka and loved them as well. Excellent, Mimi. And Brandon says he loves the in-flight Satay for Singapore Airlines. That's awesome, Brandon. Susan says, I have a friend who happens to be a Singaporean girl. Very cool, Susan. I'm curious, what does your friend think about being a Singapore girl? Does she like it? Like, does she enjoy working for Singapore Airlines? It seems like it would be a good airline to work for. Bobby Wong says, have you ever ridden first class on Singapore Airlines? Bobby, I have not ridden first class on Singapore. I've ridden business class on Singapore. I've ridden first class on United Airlines, but that's not quite the same thing as the Singapore Suites. Singapore Suites, the first class in Singapore Airlines, is really hard to redeem for. They often don't have a lot of award availability. And just in case anybody's wondering, I can actually not afford international business class. I always book that with miles and points and not my own money. Susan remarks about her friend who's the Singapore girl, said she's beautiful inside and out and gorgeous in her uniform. She loves her job. Well, that is awesome, Susan. And Susan says, I've flown F on SQ. Lovely. Susan, did you get in one of the Singapore suites, like the private pod that they make the bed and you get the pajamas? And Susan says she flew on points, which is great. I really do also want to fly first class. I know this isn't about Emirates Airlines, but I do want to fly first class on Emirates just so I can take a shower in first class. They have showers on board on Emirates Airlines, and I feel like that's one of those aspirational travel things to do. And Susan said, yes, she had the private suite. I mean, they're not even like seats. They're like you get your own room. I mean, they're pretty cool. All right. My fifth favorite thing about traveling to Singapore that I love about going to Singapore are the gardens. Singapore is kind of like a garden island. Maybe it's like a jungle island. One good thing about the humidity and the heat and the rain and things like that is the plants. They really love it. Like plants seem to love to grow in Singapore. They just grow and grow everywhere. One of the big gardens is the Gardens by the Bay. And Gardens by the Bay, they have these super trees. The super trees, they're an iconic Singaporean thing. There's these big trees that look like they're from the movie Avatar or maybe something from Dr. Seuss. Somebody actually commented on my Crazy Rich Asians video and said that the Gardens by the Bay super trees inspired Guardians of the Galaxy, that recent Marvel movie that came out. And so it's interesting, and I could totally see that. But Gardens by the Bay is this huge public garden that is open free to the public. There's these, I don't know, they're like 10-story fake trees that light up at night and have skywalks on them. It is like super amazing that this whole thing is just free for the public to go in. They have a couple of domes. They have one that has like seasonal flowers that'll do like tulips and things like that. But then they have this other one that's called the Cloud Forest Dome. And they basically made the inside of this dome like a rainforest. And it's not that Singapore isn't humid enough. It is, but the Cloud Forest Dome is even more humid. Like you go in there and they have like misters, but it's just a super neat vibe. It's not as hot in the dome as it is in the rest of Singapore, but it feels like, I feel kind of like that's what civilization would be like, living on the moon or like on Mars if, you know, people lived in biodomes. It's pretty neat, and I'd say it's the neatest greenhouse that I've ever been in. Also, the Botanic Gardens in Singapore is amazing. The Singapore Botanic Gardens is also free to enter. It is the most visited botanic garden in the world. The Singapore Botanic Gardens has 4.5 million visitors per year. 4.5 million visitors per year. That is an amazing amount of visitors. And they are particularly known for their orchids. The Botanic Garden has 1,200 species of orchids. There's a lot of orchids. And the only thing that costs any money at the Botanic Garden is to visit the actual orchid garden or to eat at the hawker centers. Yes, the Botanic Garden is so big it has hawker centers embedded in the garden. And to walk from one end to the other can easily take you a couple of hours. All right. Roberto says he's late. He's on Facebook. He says, did you mention how long is the flight? So Susan says, depends on your route, 12 to 14 hours. I think it can be maybe upwards of 16. Yeah, it depends how you go. If you get the direct flights, it's about 16 hours from the West Coast. United often connects through Hong Kong or Tokyo Narita. But yeah, it depends where you're coming from. And Susan agrees that the Singapore Botanic Garden is not to be missed. The unique orchid garden with plants created and named for famous people. I go every time I visit. That's awesome, Susan. Let's see. Brandon says, the first class life, I would like to see a Yellow Productions video about it. Brandon, I would like to see a Yellow Productions video about it too. The closest I have like a video that I did on Japan Airlines business class food. I shot some video recently on Swiss Airlines when I went to Zurich in the business class seat, so I never edited it. And we're going to be going in a few weeks to Seoul, South Korea. We're pretty excited about that. We're flying business class on the way back, this United business class, which isn't nearly as exciting as one of the Asian carriers, but still, we're looking forward. It should be pretty decent. And there were a number of you, and I think Bobby Wong was one who gave me a lot of recommendations about Seoul, so thank you very much. But if anybody else has any recommendations about Seoul, I would love to hear them. Susan asks if I've ever flown Cathay Airlines. I have not, because it's in One World instead of Star Alliance, which is like a different alliance than I typically fly. But I've heard great things about Cathay Airlines. Roberto says, lovely, you're making me want to go there. Quick question, do you have videos Okinawa, Japan? That's my next trip, and that's the first time I will go there. Roberto, unfortunately, I have not been to Okinawa, and so I have no videos on Okinawa. But you'll have to let me know how you like it. Maybe you make some videos, and you can be a guest host on Yellow Productions. What do you say? Andrea G joined in and says, hi, I'm sorry I'm late. It's okay, Andrea. Thanks for joining the live stream. Just glad you're here. Minnie C refers to Singapore and says it's a 3-shower-a-day place. Same goes for Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and the other Southeast Asian countries near the equator. Does not cool off at nighttime either. Yeah, it is a 3-shower-a-day place. Yeah, and Minnie, Topher and I were going to Thailand later this year. And it was like, I was looking at the weather in Thailand, and it's like in the summer, the high in Thailand is like 91 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you go in December, like the high temperature cools off to 89. Wow. It's like, it's like, it's hot all the time. Bobby says, I love Seoul. Thank you, Bobby, and I appreciate your suggestions. Mimi says, is there such a thing as a cooler time of year temp-wise to visit? The temperatures are always pretty hot. The best time to be in Singapore is when it's breezy, and there are certain times of year that it's more breezy than others, but it's pretty much hot and humid all year round. Lantern says, what do you think of Gaylong? I don't know that I think a lot about it, or maybe I haven't spent much time in the Gaylong district. Brandon says, hello, Topher. Brandon, Topher says hello back. He's glad you greeted him since you are the first person who's greeted Topher. RVDNSX says, Singapore is definitely on my bucket list. Do you prefer Singapore or Japan? I generally answer and say my favorite travel destinations are Tokyo #1 and Singapore #2. Just because Singapore is small, so you can't, there's like not as much to do with Japan. So I feel like comparing Japan to Singapore, like I've been back to Japan, 10 times, but Singapore, it is a small island. I probably like the food in Singapore better than in Japan, but in Japan, like I said, there's just more. Minnie C says, yes, Cathay Airlines, Singapore Air, and Japan Airlines are some of the best. Absolutely. I've done business class on Japan Airlines too, which was really nice. They give you pajamas and all that stuff as well. Ultra Con says, any recommendations for Chinese New Year in Singapore? Ooh, it's going to be expensive. I've never been to Singapore for Chinese New Year. I generally seem to go around November and December because that ends up being when I need more miles for United. Susan says, December and January are good for Southeast Asia. Avoid March in North Thailand because of the smoke from farmers burning fields in Myanmar. That's a good tip, Susan. I appreciate it. Ben from the Travel Man podcast has joined in. Welcome, Ben. And he says, Singapore is a lot of fun, although I did nearly die there. Ben, that is like a cliffhanger. And do you have right after this? So if you want to hear how I almost died, check out podcast episode number 7? Something like that. I don't remember which episode it is, but I believe Ben does have a story about how he almost nearly died in Singapore. Ultra Khan says, how would you say it's expensive? I mean, like, Any big destination in Asia during Chinese New Year is going to be expensive. The hotels in Singapore, pretty expensive. It's like one of the most expensive markets in Asia for hotels, and so I feel like it's just going to be extra expensive. That's how I think it's going to be expensive. I mean, the food's not going to be more expensive, but flights and hotels certainly will be, because you'll be going there when a lot of other people want to go there too. All right, my sixth favorite thing, since we started talking about hotels, is I love the hotels in Singapore, and they're expensive, but they're really good. They're really good hotels. And the two that I like to stay at, I like to stay at the Marriott on Orchard Road, and I like to stay at the Conrad Hotel that's in the Central Business District. The Marriott that's on Orchard Road, it's a very unique Marriott in that it has almost like a pagoda looking top. I mean, it's a high rise, but it has this kind of green tiled roof on the top of it. It has this neat like rooftop pool that's on the third floor, and their breakfast is one of the best Marriott Gold and Platinum free breakfast I've had in almost any Marriott. I mean, it's a full breakfast buffet. It's really amazing. Excellent service, excellent rooms, excellent staff. And also the Conrad in the Central Business District. People haven't stayed at Conrad's. Conrad is the high-end hotel in the Hilton chain. Conrad Hilton, name of one of the owners of the Hilton Hotel. And the Conrad has an amazing lounge on the top floor. If you go to like their breakfast restaurant, they have like real fresh orchids on the table. I mean, it's an amazing buffet spread. The rooms are amazing. And the service, it's like, you know, these are the kind of hotels where they don't just have one doorman to open the door for you. They'll have two doormen, so that, you know, it's two doors. So that way, like, two people open the doors for you at the same time. Heaven forbid if I had to open my own door. I mean, Topher, you know, he needs a lot of pampering. He really appreciates when people open the door for him. And it's like, you know, these nice hotels in Singapore, there'll be a lot of gold and brass that's polished and nice. Takes a lot of labor, but they do it, and they're nice. Trailman Podcast says, thanks for the free plug. Absolutely, Ben. And Brandon Suarez says he wants to know now. Well, Ben, why don't you drop a link into the chat so that people can find that podcast if you have a link handy. Z Blanc says, American with Singaporean roots here, and I cannot wait to go back there either. I'm looking forward to your videos from Singapore. Excellent, Z Blanc. What is your favorite part about Singapore? What do you miss? Bobby Wong says, do you rack up points to stay at the Marriott and Conrad? Absolutely. Very good. So points from staying at Marriott and Hilton hotels, but also points from spend, right? Spend on credit cards. I spend a lot of money on Chase credit cards, the Chase Sapphire credit cards. The Ultimate Rewards points transfer over to Marriott's, and I've got the Hilton cards to get points with the Hilton hotels. Ben from the Travelman Podcast says, Chris, what about the doorman in Paris? Ben, is that intended to be serious or sarcastic? Because I feel like, I mean, in Paris, unless you're staying at like some super high-end hotel, there are no doormen. But I think we had this discussion. One time I stayed at the Hotel Crillon in Paris, which is, like Madonna and Kylie Minogue and things like that stay at this hotel. And I was staying at this hotel. And the first time I went in to check in, I was wearing like a business suit and tie and all that stuff. Go in, no problem. I come back to this hotel in Paris after like a day touristing, looking like a tourist, wearing a blue, I don't know, almost like a, what is it, like a nylon shirt and cargo pants. The doorman stands in front of the door, looks at me and says, excuse me, sir, can I help you? And I'm like, yes, I'm a guest I'm staying here at the hotel. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. It was like this, you know, thanks for really, really helping me out and making me feel welcome. Right. Ben says, I looked homeless. I probably did. That's right. All right. My seventh favorite thing about Singapore is the public transit. So the subway in Singapore is known as the MRT, the Metro Rapid Transit. The MRT in Singapore, it's clean, efficient, it's inexpensive, it's well signposted. Best of all, the underground subway trains are air conditioned. The tunnels are air conditioned, the trains are air conditioned. It is a great refuge to get away from the hot, steamy weather that is above ground in Singapore. And Singapore is one of those places where Well, most places like Manhattan or things like that, I advise people to like walk around the city. You know, there's no better way to get around Manhattan or London than to walk. In Singapore, I recommend people take public transportation whenever possible because if all you're doing is walking, you'll be dead by the end of the day from the life-sapping heat. But what's also great about riding public transportation in Singapore is the other passengers are polite. And I mentioned it's cheap. You can get a 2-day unlimited pass in Singapore for $16. That's great. And the MRT, the subway trains, they're on time. That's nice too. But whatever you do on the subway, don't bring any food. Don't eat. Don't drink. And definitely don't bring on any durians. Durians specifically are disallowed. They have signs at the entrances to the Singapore subway that say no durian. Like they have a picture of a durian and a circle with a red thing through it to let you know no durian. They are that specific about durians being smelly and not allowed on the subway. Ben from the Travel Man podcast, he agrees that the Singapore Botanical Gardens is bloody amazing. It absolutely is bloody amazing, I have to say. Yeah, no durians. I'm not sure the Botanical Gardens have durians. Yippee says, same as Tokyo, no talking on the phone in the subway. I don't remember. I don't think it's like quite as disallowed as Tokyo is. I mean, Japan, they sort of have those strict social hierarchies about don't talk on your phone. I don't feel Singapore is quite as introverted and quiet as Japan is. So I could probably see people talking on their cell phones. Another great part about public transit in Singapore is taxis are easy to get. There are 30,000 official taxis servicing a population of fewer than 5.5 million on a small island. There are a lot of taxis. Just do avoid the black taxis or these Mercedes taxis. They're like these luxury taxis that charge something like 3 times the price of regular taxis. That is like a trap just waiting for the unsuspecting tourist. Bobby Wong says, Grab app is the Uber, no tipping needed. Yeah, so they used to have Uber in Singapore. When I went there last, a couple years ago, they had Uber, but Uber kind of folded in Southeast Asia, and so now the Grab app is what you have to use. Bobby said, we tried tipping the driver one time, and he politely refused and gave it back. Well, that's very nice, Bobby. I like that. Roberto on Facebook says, did you stay on the hotel that has the infinity pool? Is it very crowded? Roberto, that is the Marina Bay Sands, which is the hotel that in the thumbnail of this video where I've got the Merlion with the water and this hotel in the background that has 3 towers and the barge looking thing on top. That's the hotel that has the infinity pool. I have never stayed at that hotel. Yeah, you can only use the pool if you're a hotel guest. I have been up to the observatory, and there's like amazing views from up there, and it's never looked like the infinity pool is all that crowded the time or two I was up there. But the reason why I've never stayed at the Marina Bay Sands is I feel like it's kind of like cut off from the rest of Singapore. I mean, it's on this bay, and then it's got the gardens by the bay on the other side, and so you can't like walk much of anywhere from there, which is why I feel like Orchard Road or more in the Central Business District is more convenient. But I've heard that people have liked it. And Susan says many other hotels also have nice infinity pools. That's true, but probably not nearly as tall as that one, right? One of my favorite like swimming pools was at the what hotel was it? It was in the Andaz Hotel in Tokyo. It was like in the middle of the building, like on the 37th floor. They had this swimming pool, and it was really neat because you could go for a swim and look out on the skyline of Tokyo. Super cool. And they had like music playing underwater, so if you were swimming underwater, you could actually hear music in the water. It was neat. Mick Yared said about the talking on the train that I wish we had no talking on your mobile phone on the train here in Australia. Some people seem to be oblivious that they're sharing a small area with hundreds of other people. Yeah, that's pretty much true, Mick. That'd probably be nice here in Southern California. Minnie C says about durians, no durians in taxis and hotel elevators either. Yeah, a durian in a hotel elevator, I could see how that could be a smelly time. Tanner Wilson says a travel YouTuber named Drew Pinsky had a great video on durian recently while visiting Thailand. Tanner, what was cool about it? Tell me what was cool about that video about durian. Ben says it's also safe to take taxis if you're female. That is good. And Brandon gives a thumb down to durians. No to durians. Somebody says I look weird. Well, that's, I don't know. It's just how I am weird. So totally cool. Was it the stuffed panda? Was it the hamburger and the French fries that let you know I'm weird? I'm totally not insulted by being called weird. I really resemble that remark, so it's okay. And Susan says you can go to the bar at the Marina Bay Sands for the view. That is a great way to enjoy the view. If you are going to Singapore and want to see it and you don't want to pay for the observatory, you can just go up and get a drink at the bar. Chino Latino says, I also use the bus a lot in Singapore, more extensive network than the MRT. Yeah, I think I only took the bus once or twice, but it was pretty clean and efficient and on time. Ben says, if anyone is watching Chris for the first time, then check out all of his Singapore videos. They're really funny. Watch out for his catch line. It's hot. It is hot. And my other catch line is about the lime juice. It makes you pucker. That's what I say every time I drink the lime juice, because it does. Like, it's like, it's like so sour. All right, and Ben from the Trial Man podcast says he is as weird as Chris. Hey, that's good. You know, it takes one to know one. All right, the 8th thing that I love about traveling to Singapore is urban hiking. So, because Singapore is like the city that's like in the middle of a jungle, they've got a lot of neat hiking trails that basically run through the city. I mean, not like right through the downtown next to the skyscrapers, but pretty near the skyscrapers. There's this one trail that I really like. It's called the Singapore Southern Ridges Trail, and it's this trail that you can walk on for like 4 or 5 hours. I mean, it's miles and miles long. But what's really great about this trail is you're never far from a subway stop. You're never far from the MRT. You're never far from civilization. Though it's like you'll be walking and you feel like you're in the jungle. Though you're up on this hill and you can kind of see the city. And then all of a sudden you'll go to a bridge that crosses a road and you're like, oh, I could take the subway there if I wanted to. But after about 3 minutes, I leave the road again and end up in more of a jungle kind of atmosphere. And so it's nice to know that, like, if I ever get tired on the hike, I'm not going to die from the heat and humidity, because I can easily just stop, get something to eat, go to the bathroom, take the subway, come back, finish it tomorrow. Tanner Wilson dropped a link on Facebook to Drew Pinsky's video on durian. I will check that out later, Tanner. Thanks for the link. The 9th thing that I love about traveling to Singapore is the Singapore Zoo. I love the Singapore Zoo. And no offense to Topher, who's from the San Diego Zoo, I think the Singapore Zoo is the best in the world. That is right. I think the San Diego Zoo is the 2nd best in the world. And I say no offense to Topher because Topher's from the San Diego Zoo. That's where we adopted him from. But the Singapore Zoo is truly amazing. And there's like, the zoo has 3 parks. It has the Singapore Zoo, the River Safari, and the Night Safari. The Night Safari is a part of the zoo that's only open at night because they have nighttime animals. The zoo is open in the day because they have daytime animals. And then the River Safari is one where they put you on a boat and kind of take you down a river to see the animals that are in there. They've got, you know, elephants and a whole bunch of different things. You'll just see like the elephants like walking around the park. But what's neat about the zoos and all the zoo parks in Singapore is how they've built the animal pens. They don't really have fences. They've used a lot of natural things to kind of keep the animals there, like water features, and actually like where the kangaroos are, they let you like go in with the kangaroos. And so the animals feel like they're living in nice settings as opposed to living in a cage, right? I'm sure we've all gone to see, you know, polar bears at zoos that live in some like ugly concrete looking thing that's like supposed to look like ice but doesn't look like ice. But the Singapore Zoo just makes it look really nice, and I don't feel quite as sorry for the animals. Daniel says, I agree, the Singapore Zoo is the best we've ever visited, so beautifully executed throughout, easy to get to via MRT and bus. Absolutely, and there's actually pretty good food in the Singapore Zoo too, so that's a plus. Roberto says, I heard the best place in Japan is Kabira Bay in Okinawa. Sorry to come back to Japan, but Japan is my next trip, although I may extend to Singapore after Tokyo, Kyoto, and Okinawa. Well, Roberto, I have tons of videos on Tokyo and Kyoto, so you'll enjoy those, and no problem come back there. Minnie C says Singapore is an easy place to navigate. Most everybody speaks English and are friendly, helpful, and polite. Brandon says that sounds cool. A night safari. Ben from the Travelman podcast says, Chris, I've heard negative things about the night safari. People say it's not worth it because you can't see the animals. Can you get that call? Yeah, I'm not going to get the call right now. They're just going to have to leave a message. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, the night safari is not as amazing as the main daytime Singapore Zoo, but it's pretty neat to go there if you're just there anyway. I do agree it is kind of hard to see the animals, and so they keep the park really dim. They have like a little train car shuttle thing that takes you around to show off the different animals. But it is interesting being in a park that just focuses on nocturnal animals. I think that's pretty unique. But I would not go to the Singapore Zoo only to visit the nighttime safari, but I would visit it only in conjunction with the zoo. And there is a pretty neat, they do like this fire dance. If you search on YouTube after this for Singapore Zoo fire dance, they do this like fire dance, which, I mean, it's like, you know, people like swilling alcohol, blowing out the flames, and really impressive. Those guys get really hot because it's really hot in Singapore, and add some fire coming out of their mouth, and it gets even hotter. Mick says they were really disappointed in the nighttime safari. Didn't see much at all. The little train carriage you're in moves way too fast. During the day, it's great though. Mick, did you walk around the night safari, or did you only took the train? I thought the train was interesting, but I mean, I could see more of the animals I felt like when I was walking around, though it is kind of confusing walking around at night because it's just dark, and it almost feels like a maze, and like if you're a mouse looking for the cheese in places that you can't see because it's pretty dark. Joester says, hi everyone. A hamless man says, greetings, and Ben says the fire dance sounds neat. It is pretty neat. All right, number 10. My 10th thing that I love about traveling to Singapore is multicultural. Singapore, to me, is this amazing combination of Asian and European cultures. It's influenced by Malay, South Asian, East Asian, and Eurasian cultures. And Singapore is often called a country where East meets West, or as I mentioned earlier, Easy Asia. And related to this multiculturalism, Singapore is 74% ethnically Chinese, 13% Malay from Malaysia, 9% Indian, and 3.3% other. It's also been recognized as one of the most religiously diverse countries in the world, and has a population with sizable portions of Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, and Hindus. And you wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of Christians in Singapore, being that there's Chinese, Malaysian, and Indian, but some of the biggest Christian churches are actually in Singapore. But related to the multiculturalism, I really feel like the hawker centers embody that, where you go to Singapore's hawker centers and there will be traditionally Malay stalls that'll be also selling Tamil food, like from India, or Chinese stalls may introduce Malay ingredients, and the cooking techniques from one culture fuse into dishes from the other cultures. And there was a study done about Singaporeans, about what they think about success. Do they need to be a certain race? And over 7 in 10 Singaporeans believe that personal success is independent of race or ethnicity. I think if you took that same poll in the US, you would not get the same results. Let's see. Wilfred Cheng says, not Malay from Malaysia, Malay from Singapore. All right, Wilfred. Travelman Podcast says, cool, Mick. I haven't done the zoo. I'll do it next time. And so this was about the train I talked about. We took the train on our first visit, but on our second trip we walked around and also did the orangutan breakfast, which was pretty cool. Mick, tell me about the orangutan breakfast. I mean, that's like extra right? That's like multi-species. You know, that's what I believe in, right? Multi-species. What was the orangutan breakfast? So I feel like in a lot of, like in the U.S., I feel like we talk about multiculturalism, but there's still like the Mexican neighborhoods and the Chinese neighborhoods and this and that. The U.S., while it is a melting pot, I don't feel it is quite as melted together as Singapore is, and I feel like that's a pretty neat experience. All right, number 11. the 11th thing that I love about traveling to Singapore, and as I read this one, I'll just let you know if you've got any final questions that you want me to answer about anything, whether it's about Singapore or any other topic, now's the time to ask, because I'll answer any remaining questions after I finish number 11. And my 11th thing that I love about traveling to Singapore is that you don't need to pack any winter clothes. That's right, it's really easy to pack for Singapore. Why? Because nobody in Singapore complains about being cold. Well, I mean, that is, if they're outside, they don't complain about being cold. Actually, I might advise people traveling to Singapore to carry a light jacket, because sometimes going from the outside to the inside air conditioning can be really, really cold in the air conditioning because it's so hot outside. They really crank that air conditioning up, but that makes packing easy to Singapore because you really don't have to look at the weather. You know it's going to be excruciatingly hot and humid. Dawn Murdoch says, are there any sightseeing cruises to recommend? Dawn, in Singapore or otherwise, I didn't take any sightseeing cruises. I think if you want to take like a boat, you can take a boat in Singapore to Palau Urban. It's like this island off the coast where you can see like old Singapore. So that'd be my recommendation if you want to get on the water a little bit. Minnie C says, I love your videos, very informative and helpful, great work. Well, thank you, Minnie C, I appreciate it. Jorge says, I think you're great, thank you, Jorge. Yippee says, is it true that chewing gum is illegal? Yippee, chewing gum itself is not illegal, but spitting it onto the ground or disposing of it improperly is illegal. So that's the illegal part about chewing gum. Brandon Torres says, shirts galore to pack for Singapore. And for me, I just pack yellow shirts wherever I'm going, so that's pretty easy. Ben says, hey Chris, should I pre-book my ticket up to Taipei 101? Yeah, Ben, I saw your comment on my video, and sorry for not responding to it yet. But I've always booked it there. I don't know when I've been to Taipei, and I've gone up to 101, if that's like a new service or not. I think it depends when you want to go, but I mean, hey, if they offer an opportunity to pre-book and they give you a time or something, then I would do that, because I think sometimes it can get busy, and if it's too busy, then you do have to wait. So if they offer you an opportunity to be like, hey, book your ticket for noon, then do that. Mick Yard says, travel man, just ensure you drink plenty of water or similar as you walk around with the heat and humidity. It's easy to get dehydrated, a bit like Darwin. Yeah, I agree. It is easy to get dehydrated. Z Blanc says, I love Orchard Road. Hands down the best area to shop, eat, and walk around. Did you visit Arab Street during your last trip there at Z Blanc? I'm not on my last trip there, but on my first trip to Singapore, yeah, we visited Arab Street. If you check out my Singapore travel guide, I've linked up like 10 Singapore videos in the description below. And the Singapore travel guide is about 10 minutes, and I visit most of the major neighborhoods and things like that in Singapore, including Arab Street and Little India and Chinatown and all those places. It was very interesting. And in Arab Street, I have this scene where we were thirsty and we were hot, and so I went to get a coconut, thinking that the coconut would be cold and refreshing, because nothing is more refreshing than cold coconut milk from a cold coconut. Except this coconut stand on Arab Street, I mean, it was in sun, it was outside in the Singapore hot and humid weather, and it had no ice. And so I should have thought about this before, but there is nothing as unrefreshing as a warm, hot coconut. But that was what that ended up being. Johnny Bangkok says, the Gaylong District is my favorite. Johnny, tell me why. Why is the Gaylong District your favorite? Ben says, Chris, I'm excited you're going to Thailand. Is this official yet? We booked the tickets, so I guess it's as official as that. So yes, we'll be going to Thailand and Hong Kong later. But our next trip coming up in a few weeks is Seoul. So stay tuned for lots of Seoul content. If you want to stay in tune to what's happening in Seoul when we're there, follow Topher and I on Facebook or Instagram. You'll find links in the description below. Actually, if you're on both, follow us on both, because we generally post different pictures and content to both. Facebook, more longer form things. Instagram, more just like, oh, here's a cool picture. So make sure to follow those too. And I'll also use like the community tab on my YouTube channel to post pictures of Topher in Seoul, which should be fun. Dawn Murdoch says, I'm visiting Singapore in 2 weeks for the first time. Do they have hop-on, hop-off buses like Hong Kong? Dawn, I don't think so. I mean, I don't remember that they do. I think the MRT runs pretty much everywhere you'd want it to in Singapore, and it's pretty easy. So even if they did, I don't think you'd need to ride them, because I don't think they go places that the MRT wouldn't. The MRT pretty much goes anywhere that you would want to go as a tourist, which is pretty nice. Ben says he's going to Seoul soon too. That's excellent. And Taiwan. Yeah, Ben, that's awesome. I hope you enjoy Taiwan. And Johnny Bangkok says a Bangkok meetup. Yeah, sure, we can grab lunch or something. Show us your favorite lunch spot, Johnny. Bobby says Seoul is my #1 place. Don't forget, I tried the Shave Ice Korean dessert cafe, has great bingsu. All right, Bobby, I will do that. And Johnny corrected me and says Singapore has hop-on, hop-off buses. Johnny, do you recommend them in Singapore? Because I just think you could take the MRT wherever you need to go. But then again, I'm not somebody who loves hop-on, hop-off buses, because I like one of the things I like about going to a destination is absolutely sort of like being in it like a local is. And so in Hong Kong, I mean, I love the double-decker buses, and I'll figure out how to ride them and ride them everywhere. In Hong Kong, I also love the ding ding. It's the trolleys that run. There are these 2-story trolleys, and they call them the ding ding because that's what they have to let you know to not get run over by them. Is they have a bell and they go ding 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 ding. So of course they call them the ding ding. Daniel says he's never seen a hop on hop off bus. He agrees can't beat the MRT. Looking forward to a work trip to Singapore in November. Daniel, well, enjoy. Let's see. Ben says if you're in Seoul or Taipei and want to meet up with me, then that'd be cool. Ben, I'm not sure if you're talking to me or you're talking to other people. But other people, hey, if you're in Seoul or Taipei, you want to meet up with Ben, totally. I won't be in Taipei anytime soon. But Ben, let me know when you're in Seoul. Let's see. Bobby says we wasted a lot of time on Singapore on the hop-on, hop-off bus because it took us through the business district when there was high traffic. Yeah, I can see traffic in Singapore could be pretty bad, which is why the MRT is pretty nice. And Ben didn't want to meet with me. He wanted to meet with other people. So if you want to meet up with a wacky Australian guy who's a lot of fun to hang out with, then totally let Ben know. He is a pretty fun dude to hang out with. Hey, and if you guys make a video together, you can totally make a guest video for Yellow Productions. Totally be happy to do that. I've offered that to people, and nobody's taken me up on the offer yet. So if you want to take me up on it, I would be happy to guest post a video for folks if they're doing cool travel stuff. All right, well, that is it. If you want to see more about Singapore, check out my other Singapore travel guides. I've got links in the description below to my Crazy Rich Asian Singapore filming location, Singapore Travel Guide, Gardens by the Bay, Sentosa Island, Singapore Cable Car, Singapore Hawker Centers, the best hawker centers in Singapore, the Singapore Southern Ridges Trail, the Harpar Villa, and also hotel reviews of both the Marriott and the Conrad hotels that I talked about earlier. So lots of Singapore content. Dive in. The next live stream, it's going to be Monday, September 10th. So what is that? That's 2 weeks from now, Monday, September 10th at 8 p.m. Los Angeles time. Topic is TBD, but follow me on Facebook for more updates. I always post the topic in advance on Facebook a couple of days before the live stream. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in the next video.